Well, this type of list was inevitable at some point. I mean, characters are one of, if not the biggest parts of Fire Emblem, and I love the cast of Fire Emblem Fates, so naturally a top 10 list ranking my favourite supports was a given, well in this case a top 15 list. Yes, just like with every Fire Emblem game, well, almost every Fire Emblem game, characters in Fates can support with each other in order to flesh them out more or just have interactions with other characters, allowing for some interesting and funny conversations. And I've got to say, I really like the supports in Fire Emblem Fates, and I feel now's a good time to narrow down which of them are my 15th favourite. Naturally, I've got to clear a few things up before we begin. Firstly, this is just my opinion, and I'm ranking these supports on how much I like them, and this type of list is very subjective because people look for different things concerning supports, especially when it comes to specific characters, so don't get too upset if certain supports you love aren't on here. Secondly is that I'm doing one support per character, since I want to show a wide variety of supports, so basically we can't have 2 Xander supports on this list. And thirdly, no Corrin supports, not because I hate Corrin, though admittedly it certainly plays a factor in all this, because Corrin supports are going to be their own list at some point. Also, this list isn't about which characters I ship together, although, if there are supports on here and I ship the characters together, I'll let you know. And with all that cleared up, let us sit back, relax, and get to know each other along with the cast of Fire Emblem Fates. In fact, I think Camilla's having one of her tea parties I hear so much about. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm down for some R&R. Hinata and Honoka. It's never a bad thing to rely on others for help, and while Fire Emblem retainers know this better than anyone, since it's their job to help out their respective lords. Even still, Honoka's retainers aren't exactly the most reliable retainers in Fate, and often Honoka ends up pretty much doing everything herself. Man, they really suck at their job. Her support with Hinata not only acknowledges just how steadfast and determined she is, but also how she shouldn't feel the need to do everything and carry every burden by herself, and that there's no shame in relying on others. Man, Hinata, you really should have a chat with this guy. The support begins with Hinata watching Honoka train and being amazed by her discipline and energy. I bet that's not the only thing he's amazed by. Hinata praises Honoka's intensity and feels retainers could learn something from her, though Honoka feels she preferred not to rely on retainers and do everything herself. Later on, Hinata notices that Honoka is a bit unsteady since she's been working so much, and he pleads with her to rest for the remainder of the day. Reluctant at first, Honoka then gives in and decides to take things easy, but not before stating that she works so hard because she feels she hasn't reached her full potential yet. Afterwards, Honoka thanks Hinata for his help the other day, but questions his actions as he is Takame's retainer and not hers. Hinata then confronts Honoka about putting distance between them, explaining that there's nothing wrong with relying on others and showing weakness, because they're all companions and are willing to help her when need be, which helps Honoka to reconsider her way of thinking and realize she pushes herself too hard. I like this support because it really emphasizes Hinata's friendly attitude, as he both praises Honoka's resolve and also scolds her at the same time, but only out of love. And I like how it shows that trying to carry everything on your shoulders isn't the right way to do things, and you shouldn't feel ashamed to rely on others to help you out, which I feel ties in well to Honoka's overall character arc. While not too outstanding, I do like this support, and I feel it's one of Honoka's strongest supports. Does this mean I ship these two? Pfft, fuck no! I ship Leo and Honoka all the way. Effie and Benny. Fire Emblem Knights are awesome and I love using them. Needless to say, I enjoy supporting them together as well. Effie and Benny's support addresses Effie's very selfless and otherwise suicidal attitude when protecting allies, with Benny being the one to show Effie why she shouldn't be so reckless and just how much she means to everyone, especially me, because I never would have gotten through Conquest if you died on me, Effie. I mean, you're my second best Fire Emblem Knight for a reason. And I like you too, Benny, you're great as well. The support begins with Effie training, as usual, when Benny asks why she continues to do this since she is already very strong and probably won't get any stronger. I guess it means she already capped her strength stat. But Effie insists on going past her limit, doing the impossible, seeing the invisible. Fight the power. Later on, Benny suggests that Effie should sit the next battle out, to which Effie strongly disagrees with, and so do I. I can't get through Conquest without her, damn it. Benny then explains that Effie is too quick to endanger herself and should think about how others feel if she were gone, to which Effie stresses that Benny very much does the same thing and that at the end of the day, they both live to protect the ones they care about regardless of what happens to them. When they next meet, Benny gives Effie one of his charms in the hopes that it will keep her safe in the battle, as Benny doesn't want to lose her. Effie feels the same way, but thinks the best way to do this is to spar with one another and become even stronger and almost unstoppable. I really like this support since this is where I feel Effie and Benny are at the most natural, since you get to see both their tough exteriors and softer sides, and I like how the support addresses the roles they play and how they should think more about themselves instead of just focusing on keeping others safe. This support is very sweet, and it shows that you shouldn't be so quick to throw your life away, because there will always be people who need you in their lives. Plus, Effie and Benny are so sweet together, and yes, I ship them. Forest and Nina. Certain Fire Emblem characters have very distinct personalities or character traits to them. I mean, Joshua's the smooth-talking gambler, Keaton and Severa are tsunderes, Jill's a racist, or at least she was a racist, and Jerome is Batman.
I'm Batman.
When it comes to these two in particular, Forest is obviously very feminine, and as for Nina, well, let's just say she's very imaginative when it comes to the opposite sex. Needless to say, the support between these two is certainly something to behold. The support begins with Nina chanting Forest's name, something Forest is slightly fretful about, but she explains that Forest is pretty much the only boy she can speak to comfortably, and as such she insists on being Forest's friend. Later on, Forest asks Nina about going shopping together, but Nina is off in her own little world, thinking about Forest in all these different scenarios. I wonder how much time she spends on fanfiction.net. She eventually comes to, and Forest is starting to become more curious about her daydreams. The next time they meet, Nina asks Forest if he likes men, to which Forest says yes, but in a more broad sense. However, Nina means is Forest into men, like I can Soren into men. Forest tells her that he isn't, even though he looks very feminine, but that's just how he is. Nina feels bad for the way she acts around him, but Forest ensures her that it's fine, as she accepts Forest for who he is, and to him she's a good friend, and Nina feels the same. The support between these two is pretty damn hilarious. Seeing Nina get carried away with her thoughts about Forest is pretty damn funny, and I love the back and forth they have with each other. I also like how the support does become more personal later on, and how much both of them mean to each other, so even though awkward at times, I admire their friendship and I feel these two were pretty much made for each other, both as friends and as fanfiction material. I just hope Nina never runs into Libra, otherwise her mind will go nuts. Siegbert and Metamer. Fire Emblem has always been about war and the various different themes surrounding it, since every character views war in a different manner and fights for different reasons. The support between Siegbert and Metamer reflects this as they discuss why this war is happening, as well as why each of them fight in this war, and you get a real sense of moral grey in this support. Too bad they didn't translate it into the main story very well. It begins with Metamer asking Siegbert why they're fighting this war, hell why war even exists, since there's nothing but pain and bloodshed, and if no one wants to fight, why do they fight in the first place? To which Siegbert says that that's the only option they have at this time. Later Siegbert asks Metamer why she fights if she hates war so much, to which she says that's because it's how it's meant to be. She may not like war, but she feels it's her fate to fight in this war and doesn't bother to go against it. Not exactly the most assertive person, are you, Metamer? At A rank, Siegbert explains his reasons for fighting, and it's for his friends and his kingdom. Why does that sound familiar? Siegbert explains that everyone fights for different reasons, but they all fight united, because if they don't fight, they could lose everything that they hold dear, and while Metamer still feels war shouldn't exist, she now has a better understanding of why war exists. This support does a great job at portraying the main themes of Fire Emblem, showing how people view the war at hand and why they fight, not to mention showing them the sense of moral grey that Fire Emblem is known for. I also like how Siegbert and Metamer's views collide, since Siegbert shows Metamer why people fight, and Metamer in turn explains why war shouldn't exist in the first place, but neither of them have a definitive answer at the end of the day. Overall, this is one of the more meaningful supports that really helped to convey the themes surrounding Fates and Fire Emblem as a whole. Camilla and Ryoma. One of the best things about Revelations was being able to have the Nohr and Hoshido nobles support with each other. Well, most of them. I still don't know why Camilla and Sakura can't support together. That would have been so adorable. Nevertheless, the support between Ryoma and Camilla takes a more comedic approach to trying to resolve the conflict between both nations, as well as addressing the issues that come with being too focused on Corin. And man, are there a lot of issues. The support begins with Camilla and Ryoma wanting to forge a friendship together and trying to build peace between the two nations. Only it doesn't go too well since they keep shooting down each other's ideas. Any longer and it would have turned into an internet-style argument. Eventually, they come to the conclusion that Corin is what binds them together, and that they could talk about him for hours on end. Please don't. I can barely stand to talk about him for a minute. Hell, just thinking about him makes my head hurt. After a while, the two have a scuffle about who loves Corin more, and from there the support is a back and forth about what's best for Corin. Eventually, they realise that being so focused on Corin was a bad thing, but at the very least, it made for common ground for them to get to know each other, and now they can move forward and hopefully strengthen their relationship and the relationship between Nohr and Hoshido. I like the support since it really is rather funny to see these two go at it so intensely, and the back and forth they have is just great. Not to mention, I like how it addresses that healing past wounds and forging new friendships can't be done instantly, but there is always the possibility of making it work so long as you have common ground, and I feel this support portrays that very well. While more played for laughs, I still find this to be a strong support for both Ryoma and Camilla, but do I ship these two? Well, for the most part, yes, but whenever I see the S-rank support, I can't help but think to myself, Ryoma, get the fuck away from my woman! Kagura and Orochi. Best friends are great, aren't they? They've always got your back, are great fun to be around, and will never stop shoving their personal life into your face. Kagura and Orochi's support can pretty much be summed up as BFFs for life, since this support really shows the lengths both of them will go to for each other, as well as their interactions that make their friendship feel very genuine, though most people just associate their relationship with hot damn they have huge tits. The support begins with Orochi having a bit of a panic attack. Kagura is naturally worried about her, and Orochi explains that she lost one of the cards in her deck, more specifically one of Kagura's cards. Kagura says it's no bother, she'll just make another one, but Orochi isn't fond of the idea of simply replacing it. After a while, Kagura asks Orochi why she's so uptight about the card, and Orochi explains that this particular card symbolizes the day they first met, and they begin to reminisce about their first encounter. Eventually, Kagura does manage to recreate the card, which Orochi is grateful for, and Kagura comments that she is the only one who's ever liked her drawings, and by the end, both of them pretty much confess how much they mean to each other, and that their friendship will continue even when they're dead and buried. At this point, I'm surprised these two can't S-support together, since this support really shows just how strong the friendship between these two is, and how much they mean to each other. Not to mention, this support is very relaxed, and it shows a much lighter side of both Kagura and Orochi, since the way they talk to each other is very natural, and what they say is rather moving. The characters in Birthright I feel weren't as strong as Conquest overall, but they certainly have their moments, and the support between Kagura and Orochi is certainly one of them, showing just how far friends will go for each other, because sometimes you just can't beat the power of friendship. Nass and Perry. These two are certainly some of the more peculiar Conquest characters, since Nass is a massive dick and Perry is a bit of a nutjob. So having these two characters interacting with each other will probably lead to a really weird and disturbing conversation, right? Well, not exactly, since this support actually fleshes out a good chunk of their backstories, and the support itself is kind of sweet in a weird sort of way that I can't help but really like it. In fact, it feels like I'm watching a Tim Burton movie, or at the very least a good Tim Burton movie. The support begins with Perry wanting Nass to use that sharp tongue of his to insult her. I didn't know Perry was into that type of thing. Nass is reluctant to do so because he feels she doesn't deserve it, but then Perry asks if Nass broke into a house when she was younger. However, Nass could not seem to recall doing so, at first. The next time they meet, Nass tells Perry that he did in fact break into her mansion, but didn't end up stealing anything. Perry wonders why considering all the treasure they had, and Nass explains that they were looking for one item in particular, a killer doll. However, they couldn't seem to find it. Eventually, Nass comes to a stunning conclusion. Because Perry loved to murder people and would kill her servant, it turns out that Perry was the killer doll all along.
What a twist!
And Nass and Perry both find it funny that they just so happen to meet again despite all the odds. This support is just strangely charming. I mean, I love the backstory surrounding these two and how they first technically met, and the support just has this charm to it that I find endearing. Not to mention, I like the way Nass and Perry interact with each other. They just have this very uncanny banter going on, and though they both come off as strange, at the same time it's also rather delightful. I feel most people won't be on board with this choice, but for me, it just has this surreal attraction to it, and this support is certainly a very unique one. Plus I can't help it, but I ship Nass and Perry together. Midori and Ophelia. Reality can certainly suck at times. Bills to pay, assignments to do, long hours at work, and hearing yet another pointless news story about the Kardashians. Many people deal with reality in different ways, and Midori and Ophelia's support is very much built around this, as it addresses how each of them face reality, as well as helping each other to find a middle ground to the situation at hand. So it's always good to listen to one another and talk things out, and even if it doesn't work, well, at the very least they can partake in Midori's favourite pastime. It starts with Ophelia just being, well, Ophelia, when Midori suddenly comments on her fake fortune telling. Ophelia insists that what she's doing is not fake, but Midori refuses to accept this and simply tells Ophelia that she's running away from reality. Needless to say that the conversation doesn't end well. Afterwards, Midori once again has a go at Ophelia and stresses that she's only saying what she wants to hear. Ophelia asks what's wrong with that, since she's happy with the way she lives her life and even offers to tell Midori her future for her, to which Midori declines as she already has enough to deal with in the present due to all the pain and suffering going on around her. Eventually, Ophelia offers to tell Midori her future again, to which Midori is very hesitant towards, but she gives in and lets Ophelia do her thing. Ophelia then reveals that Midori's future is surrounded by all those she's healed and all the happiness that has come with it, which helps to lift Midori's spirits. This support is one of the more powerful ones, as it starts out rather confrontational, but over time they begin to understand each other better and learn to accept both their views on the situation. I really like how neither of them are in the right, but they each have valid points for how they deal with the situation at hand, and this support shows that sometimes you have to embrace the other side of the spectrum, even if it seems scary. I like the way these two interact, what with Ophelia's very fantasy-heavy mindset, and Midori's more down-to-earth and mature attitude, as well as how they both learn and grow through each other, and show that sometimes you have to look at the world through different eyes. Kaze and Sizer. Brothers in any sort of media always tend to have very close and deep relationships with one another, either for the right or sometimes wrong reasons. Sizer and Kaze's support is certainly one of the more deep support conversations in Fates, addressing their backstories and the issues they faced due to the events that took place, as well as showing the family dynamic between the two and the love they share for each other despite all that has happened. The support starts with Kaze questioning Sizer about his need for revenge, since his attitude goes beyond simply avenging their father, so Kaze is concerned that Sizer has been consumed by it. Sizer states that perhaps there is more to it, and acknowledges that Kaze is a good brother, but leaves it at that. Kaze then runs into Sizer and challenges him to a duel. Sizer then decides, screw it, I'll just tell you everything, and explains how he found evidence about their father's murder and tries to take revenge, only to lose his eye in the process, and ever since he's been living with the shame. Eventually Kaze decides to apologize to Sizer, not for the conversation they just had, but for never supporting him all this time, and stresses that himself and the rest of the clan are all to blame and carry the shame as one, which just so happens to leave Sizer speechless. This support certainly hits deeper than most, as we get backstory on Sizer and the burden he's been dealing with, along with seeing how much Kaze cares for his brother and wants to help him out. I really like how this support shows that despite their duties and the fact that Sizer's a stubborn dick, deep down they do love each other and will always be there for one another. Man, talk about brotherly love. Selena and Odin. Subtle nods to previous games is always welcome whenever you make a new game in a long-run series or reference another franchise. Fire Emblem Fates wasn't exactly subtle when it came to referencing Awakening, but even still, Selena and Odin's support I feel did this very well, as it acknowledges the events of Awakening, but in a rather underplayed manner, and focuses more on how both of these characters have grown from the previous game, which I really like, and the support in general is just really good. It starts with Odin asking why Selena looks so glum. Instead of the typical, "Gods, why are you asking me things like that?" response, Selena tells Odin that she's rather lonely and misses her homeland. You know, the one the game won't shut up about. Odin doesn't feel the same way, but he sympathises with her, and then comes up with a brilliant scheme only the likes of Odin can concoct. The next day, Odin comments that Selena looks happier, and that she's overall less severe. Selena, not amused by the pun, explains that she had a pleasant dream last night about being together with everyone, although the loneliness isn't completely gone. Later that night, Odin sneaks into Selena's room, and it turns out he's been using his magic to manifest dreams for Selena, with his own personal influence. The next morning, Selena calls Odin out on entering a room with evidence he left behind. Odin admits the truth, and at first Selena is royally pissed. However, Odin explains that it was all to make her happier, and while Selena isn't too happy about the forced entry, she does appreciate what Odin did for her sake. I really like how this support shows how far both of these characters have come, since Selena has dropped the tsundere attitude and is now more relaxed and understanding, not to mention Odin is more selfless and concerned about others rather than himself, though the things we love about them are still intact. I also like how it subtly acknowledges Awakening, and is used as the groundwork for their support to take place, and the dialogue is really good, especially from Odin as usual. This support I'm certainly a bit biased towards because of how it ties into Awakening, but I still find it to be a very strong support overall, and for this game in particular, I ship Odin and Selena together. Tsubaki and Mozu. Is it possible to achieve or even improve upon perfection? Well, if you saw this movie, you know the answer to that question. I say this because Tsubaki has a reputation for being perfect at everything he does, which is bullshit because look at his speed growth rate, especially for a Pegasus Knight. But in his support with Mozu, not only does he realise that there are those who are just as, if not better at things than he can do, but also how he can further better himself by learning from others, as well as Mozu being appreciated greatly for her talents. The support starts with a typical conversation between the two, but then they are suddenly interrupted by a soldier who asks for Tsubaki's advice on curing a cold. But Mozu offers her method as an alternative solution that is easier to make and more cost effective, so Tsubaki decides to give it a try. The next time they meet, Tsubaki tells Mozu that her cure worked like a charm and that he was very impressed with it. Mozu is rather modest about the situation, saying it's just common knowledge to her, and gives Tsubaki more examples of things that she knows. However, Tsubaki is fascinated by this and wishes to learn more. Later on, Mozu becomes exhausted with answering everyone's questions about how to solve X, Y, and Z. Tsubaki admits that it's his fault since he couldn't stop bragging about how great Mozu is, but Mozu doesn't mind because she likes to help people, and she herself admits that she misjudged Tsubaki, thinking he'd be jealous and competitive, but rather that they both care about helping people. This is certainly one of the sweeter supports since the amount of respect Tsubaki has for Mozu and the way he praises her is just so adorable, and I like how Mozu's attitude towards Tsubaki changes as well. I also think this support works well for both characters as far as developing them goes, since it shows Tsubaki learning from others and bettering himself through them, as well as Mozu building confidence in herself and being appreciated for all that she can do. Overall, this support is really good and I find it to be very sweet and charming, but do I ship Mozu and Tsubaki together? You know what? Yeah, why not? Xander and Charlotte. Charlotte has a lot of strong supports, but most of them follow a similar pattern that goes as follows. Start by hitting on someone and making them lunch, continue the charade and accidentally show her true nature, ending with Charlotte revealing her true self and others liking her more for it. While different things happen with different characters, this is primarily how it goes down, and I feel her support with Xander is the best of the bunch. Not only for Charlotte coming to terms with being herself, but also showing Xander at his best and most understanding, and I'll explain why in a second. The support begins with Xander taking the initiative for a change, as he's been getting reports about Charlotte's attitude. Charlotte doesn't seem to understand what he's going on about, but Xander's not having any of that, and by the end, Xander pretty much tells Charlotte to cut that shit out. Later on, Charlotte tries to woo Xander by making him lunch and flattering him. Xander admits the food is great and Charlotte is very talented, but Xander is not fooled and quickly catches on to Charlotte's act, once again telling her to cut that shit out. Charlotte then spots Xander training when faces suddenly appear and Charlotte jumps in to the rescue. Afterwards, Xander is astonished that Charlotte was able to beat them with just her fists alone. If that's the case, I imagine the fight went something like this. And then Charlotte reveals the truth about herself and why she acts the way she does. Seeing Charlotte in this new light, Xander tells her that her behaviour is fine as long as she acts within reason, and they end on good terms. This is definitely Charlotte's best support if you ask me, and even one of Xander's best, since I find the early supports really funny with how Xander doesn't fall for Charlotte's charade, and seeing Charlotte become more and more desperate to win him over. By the end, things get more serious since Charlotte reveals the truth about herself and is willing to change her attitude, but Xander acts very understanding towards her with this new perspective and lets her act the way she does, only wishing for her to dial it back a bit. I love how this support shows both sides of the characters' personalities and how they each help each other to grow and evolve by the end of it. Not to mention how all the shipping in Fate, I ship Charlotte and Xander so hard they're my number one ship for this game. Boro and Peruca. Often characters in Fire Emblem that otherwise hate each other tend to have some of the best supports in the game. A good example being Jill and Leaf from Path of Radiance. In fact, that particular support came first in my top 15 supports video. Watch that video by the way. Once again, this holds true for Fate, as the support between Boro and Peruca is a very powerful support conversation that reveals more backstory about the two and shows how patience and understanding can break the cycle of hatred, which pretty much nails the theme of Fates on the head with a critical hit. Much like most Nohrian supports of Boro, it starts with Boro scowling at Peruca, not just for being a Nohrian, but also because she's an assassin. The reason for this in particular is because Boro's parents were assassinated on their way to Nohr, and Boro suspects that Peruca knows something. However, Peruca is quick to end the conversation. Boro eventually corners Peruca and pretty much forces her to spill the beans or she'll spill her blood. Peruca then tells Boro that the man who raised her also killed her parents and leaves it at that. The next time they meet, Peruca takes the initiative and is ready to tell Boro everything. She explains about the man who raised her to be an assassin and why he killed Boro's parents. Boro naturally wants revenge, but Peruca explains that isn't possible because he's already dead. In fact, Peruca was the one who killed him. Boro feels that she's been robbed of her revenge, so Peruca offers her life in exchange, but Boro turns it down despite all the hatred, knowing that doing so will only lead to more hate and that the cycle of hatred needs to be broken. This is easily one of the darker and more emotional supports in the game, really driving home the darkness surrounding these two, not to mention the chain of events that have made their hatred grow. But even with all that, Boro is able to look past it, and while not forgive Peruca, understand that she is just as much of a victim as she is. The support not only fleshes out the characters' backstories, but also shows that these two who are sworn enemies are able to break the cycle of hatred, and I feel this support works incredibly well with Fate's overall story and underlying theme. Leo and Takame. I just knew these two were going to have one of the best supports in the game. I mean, you take the two inferiority complex brothers who have a hatred for each other's nations and put them in a room together, by all sense of logic, chaos should ensue. Well, funny enough, Takame and Leo's support shows just how alike these two are, and the way they interact with each other is just priceless, not to mention it highlights the main message behind Fates and embraces both sides of the spectrum. The support starts very much how you'd expect it to. Leo and Takame throwing insults at each other, being abusive and just all around unpleasant towards each other. Later on, Leo is baffled that people have been comparing him to Takame, and Takame, funny enough, has been hearing the same thing. Though the both of them insist they couldn't be more different, Leo asks what Takame's favourite food is to ensure they are not one and the same. However, it turns out they do have similar tastes, as well as similar taste in books and their hobbies. In fact, they even admit that they simply couldn't hate one another because they both have such excellent tastes. I feel a bromance brewing. At A's support, it turns out that they have been exchanging books and food between each other, and eventually they just give in and admit that they're friends, and that their friendship could be the start of building peace between both Nohr and Hoshido. This support made me laugh my arse off when reading it. Seeing Leo and Takame star as enemies but reluctantly admit that they're the best of friends was such a treat, and the dialogue is just pure gold. I also like how this support really goes to show how people's opinions can change greatly if you just take the time to get to know each other, since they're understandably hostile towards each other at first, but because they have so many common interests, their outlooks change completely, and this fits in well with the general message Fire Emblem Fates is trying to portray. I could say more about this support, but I feel the next clip will suffice.
If you were a chick, who's the one guy you would sleep with?
John Stamos.
What? Did we just become best friends?
Yup!
Do you want to go do karate in the garage?
Yup!
Before we get to number 1, I'd like to do a few honourable mentions. First is Caden and Keaton. The support between these two isn't very deep, but it's so much fun to read and I love the way they interact together. Next is Xander and Ryoma. This support is certainly deep and really outlines the struggle that the two nations have to go through until they can be at ease with one another. After that, there's Camilla and Niles. This is often regarded as Camilla's best support since it fleshes out a lot of her backstory, and it's certainly a very good support, just not my favourite. Next we have Elise and Sakura. The support between these two is just the sweetest thing in the world, and I love the way they bond together through the music they play. Gotta love childlike innocence. And finally there's Kagura and Kaze. I like this support because of the way these two interact with each other. It feels very natural, from them discussing Sizer's issues, to how they first met, to outlining their strengths and weaknesses, which I find charming. And with that out of the way, on to the number 1 entry. Elise and Azora. Well, Azora, it seems you come first place for the 3rd time. Slap that on your achievement list. Indeed, the support with Elise and Azora is, in my opinion, the best support in Fire Emblem Fates. To me, this support embraces everything that Fire Emblem Fates stands for and conveys its message better than any other support in the game. Not to mention I feel the way Azora and Elise interact reflects their personalities beautifully, and all in all, this support was exactly what I wanted from this game. The support starts with Elise wanting to play with Azora, though Azora isn't exactly used to Elise's very energetic attitude, and comments that Sakura wasn't nearly so demanding. This triggers Elise and causes her to become hostile towards Azora, and well, they don't exactly part on good terms. The next time they meet, Azora wants to make amends with Elise, but Elise is still rather salty about last time. Azora then offers Elise a present in the form of a kimono, and while Elise is happy about this, she's not quite ready to forgive and forget just yet, which Azora understands, but she feels the need to explain the history behind the kimono and the sentimental value it holds concerning Queen Makoto. After hearing Azora out, Elise has a change of heart and happily accepts the gift. Later on, Azora notices that something seems to be bothering Elise. It turns out that Queen Makoto's words had a profound effect on Elise, as now she wants to wear the kimono around Nohr. Both Elise and Azora address the fact that this won't sit well with people, but Elise is determined to show the people of Nohr the wonderful things that Hoshido has to offer, in order to make them more understanding and open to change. This support literally sums up the entirety of Fire Emblem Fates and conveys its themes better than any other support in the game. The way the support begins with misunderstanding, hostility and anger, but by the end changes into acceptance, appreciation and enlightenment, perfectly reflects the whole point of Fates and really drives the point home. Not to mention the way Elise and Azora interact in the support and how it builds in their relationship is both heartwarming and also rather emotional, and to me, this support is exactly what Fire Emblem Fates needed. And there you have it. Azora and Elise's support is my favourite support in Fire Emblem Fates. To me, this support embodies everything about Fates and portrays it perfectly, not to mention further developing two of my favourite characters in the game and being an all-around emotional, powerful and just plain amazing support, which is why it takes the #1 spot as my favourite support conversation in Fire Emblem Fates. This has been BlazingKnight. I wish you all a great night, take care, and you can always rely on Fire Emblem games to deliver a wide variety of great support conversations. Well, most Fire Emblem games. Nevertheless, this Fire Emblem Fates marathon is drawing to a close, and we've only got 2 more videos to go, so the next time we meet, it's time to take a step back and start from the beginning, as the next video shall be very similar to the one that started it all. Hey everyone, thank you for watching today's video. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, and why not subscribe to my channel in order to keep up to date with when the new videos are coming out. For alternate video recommendations, I first point you to my last video, Top 15 Fire Emblem Fates Songs. We'll look at my 15 favourite songs from Fire Emblem Fates. Next up, I point you to Top 15 Fire Emblem Supports, where we'll look at my 15 favourite support conversations from the Fire Emblem series as a whole. And for something completely different, why not check out Free For All Episode 6, where I pit the anime Freezing, High School of the Dead and High School DxD against each other. Hopefully one of those videos will be to your liking. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at BlazingKnight, and once again thank you all for watching. I'll see you all next time.